Avery, whose show is this? Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. We are not live in this one. This is being recorded on a Wednesday. It is going to run on a Friday. My guest today is now officially a friend of the show. You've made multiple appearances here in the lounge. We were laughing before the show because the last time you were here, we talked about the cat trade, and I don't think it's in the top 5 of craziest things that happened this year. It's absolutely, this year has been completely bonkers in almost every possible way. Jon Krawczynski of The Athletic is here joining us. John, how are you holding up?
I'm good, Anthony. Really looking forward to this series. I think it's going to be a super fun and entertaining one. And you're right. I mean, the Luka trade is kind of a curve buster. So that's, when you're trying to rate things on a scale of that, the insanity kind of goes up about a million notches. And so, yeah, the cat trade feels like, a random, kind of swap that doesn't even move the needle in comparison. So I can't wait to see what this series, kind of has in store for us. I think it'll be a fun one.
I think so too. It's a fascinating matchup here. And by the way, I hope you guys are to those of you who are watching, John covers Minnesota sports about as well as anybody has a city covered, period. And then his work on the Wolves specifically is fantastic. You can find it all at The Athletic. And he also hosts the Jon Krawczynski show for Talk North as well. And I hope you're following all of his content. If you want the Wolves story coming into this series, he's got it for you. But yeah, the matchup here is a fascinating one. First and foremost, on a macro level, it pits kind of a more traditional build where you have the shooting guard superstar, who even looks a little bit kind of like Michael Jordan. And then you have your giant front court, which features a whole bunch of rim protection and rebounding capabilities. Now they're a little modern in the number of threes that they shoot. That's the slight tweak I would make to the tortured comparison I'm making here. But then you have that team going up against an uber modern team that is now leading the league since the Luka trade in 3-point attempts per game. And just in that sense alone, John, how are you looking at this from a macro sense, from 1,000 feet up, in how the traditional matches up with the modern?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating for sure. When you look at kind of, I think, the discourse around this series so far, I'm not surprised that there has been certainly a heavily, Laker belief in this series. I mean, you have Luka and LeBron, you have Austin Reeves, you have JJ Redick's been an incredible coach. Like, they have a lot of momentum going into this series and a lot of belief in themselves, as they should. The thing that has kind of been interesting to me is like, I do think that there is a lack of understanding of how good the Wolves have been down the stretch.
Totally. Especially second half of the season.
Yeah, you look at their metrics. I mean, plus 7.1 points per 100 in the last 21 games. They're 17-4. They are top 10 offense and defense. They have a lot of things going for them that I think will allow them to at least come into this series with confidence. And I do think it is going to be a really kind of test of wills here. Like, can the Lakers stay smaller in what they want to do with where they're best? And can the Wolves stay bigger and hurt the Lakers that way? And how, which team is able to get the other out of their comfort zone, I think is going to go a long way toward dictating the outcome of this series.
Yeah, that's actually kind of the phrase that Ime Udoka used when after the Lakers and Rockets played, where he likes to play these two big lineups, right? Alperen Şengün, Steven Adams is out there. They're also really big on the wing, and it does just become who is more kind of dedicated to imposing their will in that game and then over the course of the series in this case. How confident are you that the Wolves' size can actually dictate the way that this thing is going to play out? Because to me, the stat that I'm looking at most closely in this series, and it's not really a well, I guess it is one, but the possession battle is I think going to dictate a lot of how these games play out. Minnesota has the size to generate a ton of offensive rebounds. The Lakers can be kind of flippant with the ball. I think both teams shoot the ball relatively similarly. So if you give either of these teams a heavy possession advantage, or you remove it potentially from Minnesota's standpoint, I think that will kind of decide how a lot of these things are going to go. How do you think that's going to play out for Minnesota?
I mean, I think it's a big key. I mean, there's 2 keys for me for Minnesota in this series, and the first is that size, and then the second is kind of clutch time and how they handle that area of things. But on the size front, they can absolutely uh, put out a lineup and do enough damage against the Lakers at the rim and in the paint to neutralize some of the Lakers' strengths. They
Yeah.
can do that. The way that Rudy Gobert has played down the stretch has been really impressive. More so that his teammates have found a way to keep him involved in the offense and a
Hmm.
factor beyond just put back dunks that makes opponents have to account for him. Now, they again, look, when I say they can, like Julius Randle can be a bully ball player on the block and get them easy buckets down low, and keep the offense moving if you're having to go a little bit more shot for shot with Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. Now, will they do that is the question, because Julius Randle has not had a good playoff history,
Yeah.
34% career, and so he's going to have to play better than he ever has before in the playoffs. He's playing a completely different style of game right now than he did in those other appearances. So we'll see how he adapts to that. And Rudy Gobert, from an offensive standpoint, has not really shown that ability in the playoffs very often. And
Yeah.
so, can he come close to the player that he has been over the last 6 weeks of the season? If he is, and if he can punish the switches and get those offensive rebounds and putbacks, and then also hold down the paint on the other end defensively, the Wolves are going to be in great shape. If not, they're going to have to pivot to Julius Randle and Naz Reid in the front court. They can do that. They are comfortable playing that way, but I think it opens up a lot more advantages for the Lakers if they have to go that route.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, and again, it just goes to which team can most consistently abide their prime identity. Their which team can rear back and throw their fastball most consistently and successfully. Um, the other thing you mentioned the clutch offense from Minnesota's standpoint. And the part of this that I'm really kind of interested in is because Conley's had kind of a tough season, and he shot the ball well, which I think allows him to remain playable. He shot, I think, 41% from 3-point range this year, so you do still have to account for him on that side of the ball. But in a lot of the games that I watched, they actually went to Dante DiVincenzo instead down the stretches of games. And in that double overtime game against Denver, Denver just started hard doubling Anthony Edwards just to get the ball out of his hands. And on a couple of those possessions, the ball rotates over. One of them is a Julius Randle step back 3-pointer. Another one, I believe, was a Nickeil Alexander Walker 3. And then there was another one that he got fouled on. So I guess, what does Minnesota do if the Lakers find a way to get the ball out of Anthony Edwards' hands?
I mean, that to me, the whole series is probably going to swing on what happens in clutch time, assuming that we're playing close games, relatively speaking, down the stretch,
Yeah.
because obviously the Lakers have an enormous advantage with Luka and LeBron. and how smart they are, what they can do. They're going to get good shots in those situations. They just are. The Wolves have a much bigger question mark about how they generate good looks offensively. And you're right in terms of, a lot of times teams will put two on the ball with Ant, get the ball out of his hands, and try and force other people to beat them and to make good decisions. And that puts a lot of pressure on Julius Randle. That puts a lot of pressure on DiVincenzo, Conley, Gobert, whoever else is out there. But one of the problems that the Wolves had in clutch time this year is they were too predictable in terms of it was a lot of Anthony Edwards and a lot of step back contested jumpers
which
and
he can
things of
make.
that
He's
nature.
incredible.
He can make them, but they're a high degree of difficulty.
Yeah.
And so I think Chris Finch has spent this week one of the major points of emphasis in preparation for this series is trying to find other ways to generate offense in clutch situations. And it's been a problem all year. If they were even a mediocre clutch offense, Anthony, they're the number 2 seed in the West because they've had so many games that they have lost down the stretch because they are not able to get good offense and to make the right reads and the right decision making process. Mike Conley told us this week that this is going to be a real test for Ant. He is going to have to be a thinking man's player, and he's going to have to make the right decisions. He's going to have to make quick decisions, and then he's going to have to attack when when the opportunity presents itself. So how he plays chess against LeBron and Luka is a very concerning thing for Wolves fans. And so what they do to make adjustments to be more reliable in those situations is going to tell the tale of whether they win the series or whether they lose it.
Yeah, they didn't have the best record against the premier talent in the league this season. The Wolves didn't, and I think the clutch offense played a big role in that. You mentioned Wolves fans, and this is something that I find really fascinating. We started the show kind of joking about the cat trade, but it did send a shockwave through the fan base. And because I'm a Vikings fan, I have a weird number of Minnesota Timberwolves fans, friends. And all year it was kind of this, but I don't know about the trade. And I don't, and I didn't really get the sense that they fully wrapped their arms around this Wolves team, especially compared to the one from last year, right? Which you could argue was maybe the most, if not the second most popular, most successful Wolves team in franchise history. How do Wolves fans feel about this team given the season that they just had?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a roller coaster. I think from the macro perspective, the season of unexpected success is always the best,
So
right?
much
Like
more fun. Yeah.
when you're coming out of nowhere, when no one expects it, when no one sees it coming, and you're just riding this euphoric high the whole year. And that's what last year was for Wolves fans. Like they went in kind of having some nice expectations, but nobody saw 56 wins, Western Conference Finals, all of those things. And that was so much fun for them. And so then you come into this season with real expectations. Okay, they went to the Western Conference Finals. They now it's time to take the next step. And every game was a referendum on Tim Connolly, Chris Finch, Anthony, like there was no like level-headed approach. It was if they were winning, like here comes the championship. It's like worst trade ever. I can't believe they did it. What in the heck is going on with these guys? And so there was a lot of emotions that they just have gone through. I do think especially early on when the team was struggling, when Cat was playing incredibly well in New York, there was a lot of people that were just like, this is a huge mistake. What were they doing? How could they break this team up? A lot of them, by the way, Anthony, the same people who after the Dallas series were like, get Cat out of here. I don't want let's move on. And
Yeah.
so, but then as the season has gone on, as we have gotten into March and April, and as we have started to see like some cohesion, this team figure it out a little bit. I do think that there's excitement or surrounding them. There's certainly a lot of nervousness. I mean, as you know, Minnesota sports fans are the most, fatalist,
Traumatized.
traumatized, yeah, group that I can think of, and that's not hyperbole. I think in the entire
Yeah.
country. So they're expecting the worst. But at the same time, I do think that they have grown to enjoy this team because they've seen it really struggle to find itself throughout the year. And they have largely gotten through a lot of the bumps in the road. And so there's a certain respect that this team has earned with the fan base. And if they are somehow able to win one of the two road games to start, game 3 will be unhinged in Target Center, and everyone will be excited about it. But there's a lot of, as our Vinny Goodwill says, there's a lot of clenched cheeks around here too. Like, they did not want the
Yeah.
Lakers. They did not want Luka. They are very worried about the possibility of being embarrassed by the national darlings and looking less than. And so they're going through the gamut of emotions right now with this series.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is for precisely the point that you made there. It makes it all the more important that that Minnesota picks up that split in LA,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
if this series goes 2-0 to Minnesota and then the Lakers take a lead in game 3, I think that's when you'll see that classic kind of Minnesota fatalism come in,
mhm.
and the referendum on the trade starts happening, and that kind of that avalanche starts kind of building up. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how if that happens, how the Wolves respond to that. And I think it's also a great point that you make, that this team deserves a lot of credit for the way that they've kind of handled this season, given all that noise, given the doubt about the trade, and how everything went at the beginning of the year. Um, yeah, it's a really, I was literally texting with a buddy of mine, uh, who works with the Lakers, and I was like, yeah, I would really kind of prefer not to play the Wolves. They're big. They have a clear advantage that the Lakers don't really have an option for. But the same can be said about the Lakers, right? Their small ball lineup um, is something that I don't think Minnesota has an option for. And so it's just a matter of which group or which identity is able to stick things out a little bit longer. Um, from Minnesota's side defensively, one thing that I noticed in looking a lot more closely at their defense, they have a bunch of guys. They're actually kind of similar to OKC in that
Mhm,
they pressure the ball, they get into your jersey on the perimeter, and then if somebody goes by them, they're very good at rotating back, and they have great presences on the interior, to swallow up the paint. But when the Lakers have played OKC this year, and when generally those teams play against Luka, the thing that those teams tend to run into is he's bigger than they are.
mhm.
And so they might get into his jersey down low, but he can just either muscle them into the spots that he wants to get to, or he can throw the ball over the top to generate an advantage that way. Who guards Luka in the series?
I mean, it's gonna be, I think, a host of people that do it. My guess is that they will start a little more conventional with what they like to do in terms of they like to put Jaden McDaniels on
Yeah.
the point of attack. Now, one problem for them in that is that Luca has not been bothered by Jaden McDaniels' length, by his approach to playing defense, like most point of attack offensive players have been. And so I think what the Wolves are hoping for is that without the option of Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, Derek Jones Jr., that lob threat as much at the rim with the Lakers that the Mavericks had, that it might be a little bit different approach, that they can have a little more success with Jaden McDaniels on him. But if not, if that doesn't work, I mean, I think you might see Julius Randle guard him a little bit. You might see Naz Reid guard him. You might see Jalen Clark guard him. You might see even Ant at times guard him. And so they will throw the kitchen sink at him. And now Luka has an answer for everything. He's seen everything. And so my sort of like outside view of it would be, I would be inclined to sort of guard Luka almost the way that they guard Jokic, in terms of when they play Denver, they're like, Nikola, if you want to score 50, if you want to score 60, if you want to score 40, be our guest. What we don't want you to do is have 17 assists to go with that, to get Michael Porter Jr. going, to get Jamal Murray going, to get these other guys going. And so maybe an approach is, in this one, is, hey, Luka's going to go for 40. What we can't have happen is Austin Reeves, is LeBron, is all of these other complementary plate pieces getting 25, getting 28, getting 19, doing those sorts of things. And so trying to limit Luka to being more one-dimensional might be the role. Now, that is incredibly difficult. He's an unbelievable player, but that's just kind of the calculus I'm trying to do in my head, to look at what could they possibly do against a player that has had very little issues with anything that they've thrown at him in the past.
Yeah, McDaniels is a stellar point of attack. He's long, he's athletic, he's actually really smart. I actually really like watching him, because he doesn't have the same approach with everybody. Sometimes what drives me kind of nuts watching somebody like Lou Dort is, it's the same football player playing basketball type of defense. It's a bunch of hand checking and stuff like that. Jaden McDaniels is I think a little bit smarter in his approach to this stuff. But at the end of the day, you're only as strong as you are. You're only as big as you are, only thick as you are. And I think that's where Luka just isn't as bothered by McDaniels, is because he's giving up, 30, 40 pounds. And yeah, I'm really curious on that one. The LeBron thing is an interesting one here, because this is the very first series in his entire life that he's not the top line of what Minnesota's looking to stop on that side. How does Minnesota dedicate all of the resources it takes to deal with Luka, but then not lose sight of LeBron? And it's I'm telling you, John, it's been the weirdest thing. On a couple of occasions down the stretch of the season, teams would just forget LeBron is out there. He had that tip in against Indiana, that one game. And it was just like, how'd you lose LeBron? But that's kind of what happens when you're dealing with Luka. So how does that math play out?
I don't know. I think that's the problem, right? Like, yeah. I really don't. When you look at the thing that really gave the Wolves problems against the Mavericks last year, was that they had Luka, but then they also had Kyrie playing at an unbelievable level. Yeah. And so having that second option was just too much for the Timberwolves to be able to handle. Now, you have an even better second option this time around with LeBron. And so what they can do to cover both of like the best offensive players that we've ever seen, it is going to be an enormous challenge for them. You look at the way that this NBA has laid out the schedule and rolled out the red carpet for the 40-year-old to have
rest,
3 2-day breaks in between games in a series is incredible luck for the Lakers. The Wolves will benefit from that as well. They'll get that rest, and that will be good for them. But it's insane.
The team that needs it more is the Lakers.
Yes, they have it. Look at the two teams that got all the rest in this first round.
Lakers,
it's Steph Curry and LeBron James. Amazing how that works. So so I would say, like, the chances of the Wolves just physically wearing him down over a long series is almost, impossible now. Like, that's just not
Yeah.
going to happen. So I think it really is going to be incumbent upon Rudy Gobert to be in two places at once defensively.
Well,
And
I was actually thinking maybe the way that you wear him down is actually on the offensive end by keeping
mhm,
Gobert in, by keeping Naz
mhm,
Reid in, by keeping Julius Randle in, and make him box out as often as you
yes.
possibly can, and force him to really work on the defensive end so that you know when he goes to his bag in the fourth quarter, he's a little bit more tired than he would maybe necessarily be.
And I think that's for both Luka and LeBron,
Yeah.
Anthony. I think one of the things that the Wolves were really poor doing in the Western Conference Finals last year was they did not make Luka work defensively at all. And I think that it was easier for the Mavericks to hide Luka because of their other defensive players around them and their size at the rim. And so, if the Lakers are going to play small for a large portion of this series, the Wolves absolutely have to try to wear Luka out defensively and get him in actions and make him run around and just attack that way. They did not do that with the Mavericks, so he had a lot of gas in the tank to score down the stretch and run things as much as they want. And so I think yes, both Luka and LeBron need to be targeted defensively and at least made to work. Maybe they'll stand up to it and maybe they will do okay with it. But over the long haul of a game and a series, you hope that that sort of adds up over time and just takes just a little bit of their sharpness away when it gets to closing time. And then maybe a three doesn't fall that normally would, or maybe there's a turnover that they normally wouldn't make because they're just a tiny bit off with the reaction time. But the Wolves' best chance is by trying to go at them defensively and trying to just get them huffing and puffing a little bit.
Last thing before we get to predictions, what is the thing that you think the Wolves are most confident about, like in this series? What's their whether it's Anthony Edwards' ability against Lakers defenders, whether it's their offensive rebounding capabilities, whether it's their smothering defense. The Wolves actually did a phenomenal job this year of keeping teams' production from 3-point range down. What do you think coming into the series? Like, why do Wolves fans think they can win or why do the Timberwolves think they can win the series?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the perimeter defense is really, really good, and so that's one thing. But the ultimate thing that inspires belief and injects hope into a cold-hearted fan base is number 5. Like,
Yeah,
he is a playoff riser. He
absolutely.
will walk into that building on Saturday fully believing, and this is not a joke, that he's the best player in this series.
Mhm.
And so his ability to answer the bell on bright stages is what the Wolves are going to pin their hopes on. And it is a lot that's going to be placed on his shoulders, but he wants all of that weight on his shoulders. And so how he navigates that, what the Lakers do to make him uncomfortable, and his ability to dictate the rules of engagement, I think is going to be a big thing. If he comes out and plays really well in game 1 and goes at them, all of a sudden that really kind of raises the level of everyone around him. And so these guys follow him into battle. They believe in him in a way that few teammates I've seen kind of have believe in their guy. And so they need just an enormous series from Anthony Edwards, and he believes he can do it, and they believe that he can too. So that's where it starts and ends with the Minnesota Timberwolves.
How do you think this plays out?
I'm still thinking about it, Anthony. I will say, like I said at the top, I do not think this is a cakewalk for the Lakers. I think that this is going to be a long series, and so I would choose Lakers in 7 or Wolves in 6, one of the two. I
Yeah.
haven't really kind of landed on it yet, but I do think that the Wolves have the ability to win this series. And maybe that sounds homerish of me or not, but I'm not sure. But I really think that it's going to be one of the best series of the first round. It's going to be incredibly compelling, and the star power and all of the kind of drama around it is going to be just so much fun to watch. I really can't wait for it.
Me neither. There's so many angles to this. Yeah, you mentioned the star power, and then the traditional versus modern. It's and then you also have the Lakers in Minneapolis relationship
Mhm.
that is it play in this one, as is always the case when these two teams match up. All right, before we get you out of here, anything that you want to plug specifically that we should be looking for? You had
Yeah,
that great profile of the Ingles family
Mhm.
earlier this year, and the Wolves' choice to start him. If you guys haven't checked that out, you should. Yeah, whatever it is that you want to plug, though.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. At The Athletic, we have a bunch of, content coming this week that previews the series. We have a cool feature on one of the assistant coaches, and then just some real kind of looking at the head-to-head with, Jovan Bua and I. And then, yeah, I have a weekly Timberwolves show, the Jon Krawczynski show on Talk North Sports Podcasting Network. And so we will be doing shows after game one, after game two, or no, after game one, and then when they go back as well. So just kind of tune into that and check that out. I'd appreciate it. But thanks for having me on.
Thank you, John. I always appreciate you making time for us. It's a real honor to be able to talk to you about this stuff, and I'm going to keep bugging you in your DMs about the Vikings.
Sounds good, man.